The New York Giants preseason is over, but questions remain. From offensive line concerns to rookie standouts, we're breaking down where the team stands heading into week one. Locked on Giants starts right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets right now. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're making us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, I have special guest Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View. You know him, you love him. We all love him here at the Locked On Giants podcast. Ed, first off, how are you doing?
I'm good, Patty. I'm good. I actually haven't been around the Giants for a couple days with this sort of weird little break that we've got with the end of the preseason, before the roster cuts. It's so odd.
Yeah.
It's like 5 days. It's 4 or 5 days. It's crazy.
Yeah, and nowadays this is the place to be for sure. But anyway, on today's show, we're going to talk about the training camp and the preseason. So a little bit of a recap where things currently stand with the Giants. Then we're going to turn to a rookie report. We're going to give our takeaways on the rookies, who looked good, who didn't, the surprises and so forth. And then we're going to spin ahead to what's coming up. Now, as we record this, the Giants have not completed any, or I should say they haven't completed their roster cuts. So we're not going to go too deep into that because things might change, but we'll talk about maybe some of the needs and, question marks and whatnot. So let's get into it. All right, Ed, give me your overall take on summer training camp. What did you learn basically from camp?
Well, honestly, Patty, I don't think the summer could have gone a whole lot better for the Giants. Really, you 3-0 preseason. They scored a ton of points. You looked at, and I asked Brian Daboll about this the other day, but you look at Thursday night, they seem to have so much fun. They seem to feel so good about each other. They really enjoyed it. There's such a good feeling around this team right now, and I think that's the way you would hope to come out of training camp, to come out of the preseason, feeling really good about yourselves. But as Daboll said to me, he said it really doesn't matter. What matters is what happens beginning September 7th. I mean, you feel good about the fact that, I don't want to discount the TJ Moore injury, but the Giants didn't have any major injuries in training camp. They didn't lose anybody they were counting on as a frontline player in one of the preseason games. You feel good about that too. You feel really good about what you saw from Jackson Dart. So I thought it was a good summer for the Giants. I thought it was a really good summer for the Giants. You just hope that there's no guarantee it translates to anything at all, though.
Right. I mean, it's something that they can build on. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, because it's certainly better than coming out of the preseason, having lost a couple of your big name players to injury, having not played well, entering the season feeling like you're already headed for another lost year. So at least you're starting the season from a good place. And that's, we can quibble, and you and I have quibbled forever and ever about preseason playing time. And I would have preferred that the Giants play their starters in the week 3 game instead of the week 2 game, just because of the break is so long. But at least most of the frontline players got a decent amount of work this summer in the preseason games. And I thought that was positive too.
That being said, you bring up a good point. Because there is such a big break, how concerned are you that maybe there might be a little rust, especially, you look at the practice schedule this week, they're really just having one padded practice, that being on Wednesday. Then they've got a nice long weekend, the last free weekend before, games start. So how concerned are you that, all this momentum that they built up maybe tailors off a little bit?
Oh, I'm absolutely concerned about that, Patty. After the preseason game on Thursday night, there was a couple days of break. And as you said, there's, it's light practice for a couple days as they set the roster, one padded practice on Wednesday, another break for a few days coming after that. And then you reconvene and you start practicing for the Commanders. So it's absolutely a question as to how you maintain that momentum, how you stay sharp. And it's why I would have preferred to see guys play. It would still have been 16 days if they had played against the Patriots, but it's 22 days since the frontline players, between September 7th and the second preseason game against the Jets is 22 days. That's a long time to go without real solid competitive football. So, but the flip side of that is I think most NFL teams handled it that way, but still it's tough. So you do question how sharp everybody's going to be and whether they lose some of that good feeling that they had, after Thursday night.
Speaking of which, you have a couple guys, key guys, that did not see any action in the preseason. Andrew Thomas, who spent most of the preseason on PUP, and Malik Neighbors, who was held out. And of course, Dexter Lawrence, we throw Dexter Lawrence in there as well. You know as well as I do, there's a difference between being in shape and being in football shape. How concerned are you that those guys might not be in football shape when the season starts, and that might have a bearing on their, first week performance, maybe second week?
Well, I'm not as concerned about Dexter or Malik Neighbors, to be honest with you. I think I would have liked to have seen Dexter play a little bit more. He's a guy, 340, 350 pound guy, and he already has, at 24, 25 years of age, they give him a lot of veteran days off when it comes to practice. They already are really careful with his workload. So you just, because he plays 85% of the snaps on game day, you do have to wonder if he's going to be ready to do that week one. We'll just have to see. Malik Neighbors, I'm not as worried about. Patty, I think you and I saw Malik enough times last year hobble around the locker room in the middle of the week. I think you and I saw him enough times to know that he'll show up on game day and he'll be fine. I do worry about Andrew Thomas just because it's been so long now since we've seen him play, healthy and play at the really high level that he's capable of. I do worry about the fact that he hasn't been hit at all. He hasn't practiced really. I mean, he'll practice in most of these walkthroughs. I don't know how much he'll do Wednesday when the Giants are in pads. I do worry about that. And I worry not only about his readiness for the season, but it's been a while since we've seen the all-pro version of Andrew Thomas. That 2022 season when he was phenomenal, he's 2 injury-plagued seasons back-to-back where when he was on the field, he was okay, but he wasn't that guy. So you just worry about his readiness and about what he is at this point after all the injuries that he's gone through.
Yeah, and he's a key player. I mean, if they lose him or don't have him, I should say, that offensive line, we're going to be right back to where we started from with regards to questions on that unit. And speaking of which, Ed, do you feel that offensive line, otherwise, Andrew Thomas aside, do you feel like some of the questions that we had about that unit have been answered, or are you still having concerns?
Well, I feel better about that group, Patty. I mean, I feel better about that group, especially if Thomas is there. But John Runyon is never going to be an all-pro player, but I feel better because John Runyon is healthy. I think John Michael Schmitz takes a lot of grief from the fan base, and John Michael Schmitz is probably not the Pro Bowl caliber player maybe that the Giants thought they were getting. But John Michael Schmitz did show a tremendous amount of improvement from year 1 to year 2. If that continues, they're fine at center. If not, then they'll have to look somewhere else. Greg Van Roten is okay at right guard. I had hoped, and I think you had hoped as well, that Evan Neal would win that job, and that really didn't happen in the spring. So we'll see what happens there going forward. Jermaine Illuminor is a really good right tackle. I feel okay about this offensive line. Marcus Bowe, provides some good depth. James Hudson provides some good depth. Obviously, you don't really want to see James Hudson start 17 games, but I feel better about this line. When Andrew Thomas was healthy a year ago, they were a middle of the pack, competent offensive line. And I quite honestly think if they can be that for the entirety of the 2025 season, that's fine.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because if that unit has the problems that it had last year, they're all in trouble. So
I do feel better about the depth,
yeah.
At least about the depth. I don't know how well James Hudson's going to play, and I don't know how well Evan Neal's going to play if they need him to play. And Marcus Bowe is still a rookie, and we don't know if he's going to be as good in the regular season as he was in the preseason. But I at least feel better about the plan, about the approach that the Giants took to building out the depth. It seems like they at least covered their bases this time, with guys who should be able to give them some good enough play. And they added, the young guy in Marcus Bowe for the future. So I feel a little better, at least about the plan.
All right, Giant fans, we're talking with Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the rookies, a rookie report, who impressed, who didn't, surprises, and all that stuff coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So go on. If you feel like it, take a flyer on the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. If you feel good about Giants outside linebacker Abdul Carter running away with the award. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets right now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Hey, Giant fans, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for helping us out. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. My special guest is Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. You know him, you love him. He's been here before. He's not a stranger. Ed, let's talk about the Giants rookies. Now, I think we can both agree that Abdul Carter was everything we thought he was going to be. Jackson Dart had a very, very strong summer, probably a little stronger than I think a lot of us thought would be. Where else did you see guys amongst the rookie class, and not necessarily the draft picks, but who stood out to you besides those two in terms of the rookie class? I know you mentioned Marcus Bowe in the last segment. So who were some of your standouts, including undrafted free agents?
Well, Marcus Bowe, of course, Patty. I mean, played the right, played the left. I don't know if the Giants would actually use him, on the left unless it's an emergency situation, but he showed the versatility. That's one of the reasons the Giants drafted him, to play both sides of the line. Bowe, of course, was impressive. I was really disappointed that we didn't see more of Cam Skattebo in the preseason. I think he's going to have a really solid impact, on the offense, especially in the passing game. I really do. I think a lot of those passes that we saw going to Turbo Miller in preseason are balls that are going to wind up going to Skattebo in the regular season. And I'm anxious to see what he can do, in that role. It's so hard to figure out the undrafted wide receiver group. I was really happy with Bo Collins until I wasn't happy with Bo Collins. All right. I couldn't help it, Patty. I couldn't help it when Bo Collins ran the wrong route on Thursday against the Patriots, and it was the second week in a row he ran a wrong route that caused an interception. Okay, I couldn't help it, but I had Ruben Randall flashbacks. I couldn't help it because, as talented as he might be, the one thing a quarterback has to be able to do with a wide receiver is trust that a wide receiver is going to be in the right place at the right time. That he's going to be where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. Because, as we saw 2 weeks in a row, awful things happen when that doesn't happen. And awful things happen that go on the quarterback's record, but aren't the quarterback's fault.
Right.
So, he was really impressive, and then he wasn't. And then he made me wonder if he belongs on the practice squad. Yeah. So I don't know what they're going to do there. I thought Makari Page had a really nice game Thursday against the Patriots with an opportunity to get extended snaps. I can't really, Thomas Fidone had a good summer. I am very anxious to see how the Giants go about structuring their tight end room here in the next day or so. You can make arguments a lot of different ways as to how they might do that. The one thing I think they're not going to want to do is expose Thomas Fidone to waivers.
No. He'll never make it.
No, he'll never make it. He'll never make it through waivers.
Yeah.
Maybe the one guy that, Darius Alexander had kind of a quiet summer.
Yeah.
But he didn't practice at all in the spring, Patty. And I wonder how far behind he actually is or was because of that. It might be a while before we see Darius Alexander make a real impact on that defensive line.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that was the guy I was actually going to ask you about, because that's a theory I have. He didn't practice all spring, and I'm sure that put him behind the 8 ball. And quiet summer, I think he made one play of note in the preseason finale against the Patriots, but just not enough there. But he's got, skills to work with. And Andre Patterson and Brian Cox, the defensive line coaches of the Giants, they'll get the most out of that guy. I mean,
Absolutely.
They do wonders with guys.
So. It just may take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
It may take a little bit of time, which means Giants fans, just brace yourself. You're going to see more of Rakeem Nunez-Roches than you probably want to early in the season. You might see more of DJ Davidson than you want to early in the season, provided he makes the roster. But I don't doubt that Darius Alexander is going to be a really good player.
Right. Now, one guy you didn't mention amongst the rookie draft class was Corey Black. Now, I know Corey Black had some injury issues. Probably going to be, my guess, at any rate. The first Joe Shane draft pick not to make a 53-man roster. I think practice squad might be in his future. Based on what you were able to see, and he did play, a little bit there towards the end, what did you think of his summer?
Patty, it's hard to think much of anything of his summer because I don't think I noticed him all summer.
Ooh.
I don't think I noticed him all summer. And that's why, I mean, he's a tremendous athlete, really good athlete, but I do think he's headed to the practice squad.
Yeah.
There are a couple of corners, depth corners that have a little bit of NFL experience. I'm thinking about Nick Jones and I'm thinking about Art Green, guys who might be ahead of him on the depth chart at this point.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see, what they do with him. I do think he's going to the practice squad. I agree with you about Fedoni, that there's no way they can put him through. And I'm curious to see the numbers. I mean, we'll talk more about that in the next segment, but the Giants with some very difficult decisions coming up in terms of the roster, decisions that might be, already in place by the time you see this podcast. So anyways, on that note, coming up next, we're going to look ahead at numbers. We're going to look ahead at what still needs to be done. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now is the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. With the season kickoff set for September 4th, now is the time to start playing on Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, in which the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew then together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew? Hey, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so again, don't wait. Start your league right now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. My guest is Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. And Ed, as we record this, it is Monday morning. The Giants will have the initial 53-man roster. We've got to stress that because the roster will change from the initial 53 once they go through waiver wire pickups and stuff like that. But I want to ask you, you've done a 53-man roster projection. I know I have. Everybody has done one. But where do you see probably the biggest needs remaining, positions where maybe you were like, I don't know if the guy that they need is still on the roster yet?
Patty, there are three spots that I'm watching, and we kind of touched on one of them, maybe two of them already. I think cornerback is one where, all right, if they're going to go with Cordell Flott and Tay Banks, at cornerback 2, fine. All right, they'll figure, they'll get decent play out of those two in some fashion. But you're looking at depth pieces of Trey Hawkins, who barely practiced all summer, Nick Jones, Art Green, guys who are, journeyman NFL corners at best. And as we talked about earlier, I think Corey Black is probably headed to the practice squad. It wouldn't shock me at all if they add a corner. I don't really know how they feel about Trey Hawkins at this point, but it won't shock me at all if they add a corner. It absolutely will not shock me if Gabe Davis is a Giant sooner rather than later, or if they go out and add a wide receiver. Because look, how many wide receivers on that roster do you trust beyond Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson? My answer to that is a big fat 0. Okay. Jalen Hyatt, not after he dropped 2 balls the other night that he should have caught. Did catch a touchdown pass. Really didn't have a great summer. I love the kid, but it's been 2.5 years of hype now, and nothing to show for all of that hype. And off what I saw this summer, I still question just how much the Giants are going to get out of Jalen Hyatt. Amir Smith-Marset is a nice return guy, but he's never shown to be a wide receiver. Same with Gunnar Olszewski. The same with this group of undrafted free agents that they still have to choose from. Little Jordan Humphreys, probably not a big-time wide receiver. He might be a red zone threat if they keep him on the roster, which I think is debatable. I just look at that group, Patty, and beyond that first 3, there's not a guy that I really, really want, that I'm dying to see on the football field, that I think can be trusted to make a play when the Giants need one to be made.
What about safety?
Safety's another one. The Giants cut Kayvon Wallace, who I thought had a chance to make the roster because of his previous connection to Shane Bowen, which someday I'll learn not to put as much stock in that as I have in the past. Raheem Lane, Makari Page. Do they really trust those guys to be on the field if they need them to play? And I don't know the answer to that, but I saw floating around the internet in the last 24 hours the notion of trading for Kyle Duggar from the Patriots. And I don't know if you want to give up a draft asset for the guy, but it does raise the point that safety could be a spot, where you add somebody. If the right defensive tackle falls into your lap, a really good run stuffing nose tackle to back up Dexter, if the right defensive tackle falls into your lap, because that's still a question, Patty, is do they have enough when they take Dexter Lawrence off the field? Do they have enough in those interior defensive linemen? So that's another one where you might look for an upgrade if they fall into one.
You mentioned the talk about trading for Kyle Duggar. They don't necessarily have to trade draft assets. They could do a player for player swap, which kind of leads me to my next question for you. We know that the Giants are probably not going to go into the season with 4 quarterbacks. They could potentially, on the initial 53, keep 4 just until they get an offer that they like for maybe, whether it be Tommy DeVito or Jameis Winston. But that said, could you see a scenario where it would make sense to trade one of those quarterbacks for a player-to-player swap?
Absolutely. I know you did places where DeVito might be, landing spots for DeVito in a trade. I did one as well. And you always think of a draft pick, for that guy. But if there's a backup safety on a roster that you think, might be a good fit, if there's a wide receiver you might think, you think is a good fit, that would work too. So yeah, I could see player for player. I could see player for player with a guy like Bellinger too. I'm very curious, and we don't want to belabor all the roster decisions. I know that, because who knows what's going to happen between now as we record and the time that the show airs. But I am very curious to see what happens with Bellinger, because I keep saying at Big Blue View that for whatever reason, I don't feel like this coaching staff has ever really valued Daniel Bellinger the way that the fan base values Bellinger.
I agree with you on that. And, it's a shame. He's not a bad player. He's not a TE1, but he would certainly make a good TE2 for a team, I would think. Mm-hmm. All right. And final question for you. And this is kind of like a big picture type of deal, but Brian Daboll came into, this preseason, the summer, going into the season on the hot seat. Now, he's made some changes to how he has done some stuff. Can you just reflect back on the changes that he's made, the growth he has shown, and do you think he's headed in the right direction, having changed some of his ways that weren't really working before?
I do. I think that the biggest one, and Daboll hasn't officially said it, and he's never officially going to say it, but he's not going to call plays this year. And I've said this before, Patty. The Brian Daboll of 2022 was maybe bubbly isn't the right word, but the Brian Daboll of 2022 was very energetic, very involved. You would see him all around the field. You would see him involved with defensive players. You would see him involved, with the wide receivers. You would see him, talking to everybody. I didn't really see that the last couple of years, and especially last year when he was calling plays. And I just like the version of Daboll that we see during practice when he's not tied to having to call the plays. I've liked what I've seen with the way he works with Jackson Dart. I think that relationship might buy him another year, just as long as the wheels don't come completely off. But for me, that's the biggest change in Daboll. I also think that he did, although I've said before, I said I wish he had played starters in week 3 instead of week 2. I do think he pushed guys a little bit harder this summer than he has in the past. I really do. Just in terms of not necessarily practice-wise, but getting them on the field and getting them game reps. And I'd have to go back and count what guys got in 2023 and 2024, which I haven't done. But it seems like there was a more concerted effort to get guys on the field and get guys, some actual game snaps. So I have liked some of what I've seen. The most interesting part is watching him work with Jackson Dart.
Yeah. It
really is. And just some of the stuff that, like turning the guy's headset off in the middle of the game the other day is just, that's cool stuff. Make the guy call a play, make the guy call a play on the fly when he's not expecting to have to do that. Throw him in the game the other day when he wasn't expecting to go in with the starters. It's been really interesting to watch him work with Dart.
Yeah, and he's been literally glued to the kid's side every time they've been on the practice field. So, look, that's his hand-picked quarterback, and, he has his plan, and we've kind of seen a little bit of the plan, how it's come out. And unfortunately, moving forward, we're not going to be able to see the entire practices, so we don't know how the practice reps are going to, be doled out for Jackson Dart. But certainly what they have done so far with him has worked, because he had really a strong summer. I think arguably the best summer of all the quarterbacks in the draft class.
Absolutely, Patty. Unfortunately, there are no trees around the Quest Diagnostics Training Center practice field. There's no trees that we can sneak up in and hide and watch practice from up in there. But, no trees we can do that from. But, the thing of what's that?
Get creative and think of a way.
We'll have to figure it out. But the thing about Jackson Dart is he did everything this spring and this summer that you could have asked a first round quarterback to do. He showed you everything, from ability on the field to leadership to comfort in his surroundings, all of that. The only negative to all of that, Patty, is that every time Russell Wilson makes a bad play, he's created a situation where people are going to start screaming for Dart to play. So he's created that shadow, which eventually that shadow is going to get solved, because eventually he's going to take over, but it's there from day one. So, so we'll see what impact that has.
Hopefully a good one, because the tide's got to turn. I'm tired of losing. I know you're tired of losing, but anyway.
Well, I do think the only other thing I was going to say is I do think this is a better football team than people want to give it credit for. Whether or not with this daunting schedule, whether or not it's going to show up in the record, I don't know. But it's a better football team than people want to give it credit for.
Amen. Agree. All right, Ed, appreciate you coming on. Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, make sure you keep it here all week. We will have roster reactions. We'll keep you up to date on waiver wire requests and all that good stuff as we continue our coverage here on Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure, again, you check out my work on New York Giants on SI. Check out Ed Valentine's work on Big Blue View. He's doing a lot of good stuff over there, so do check that out. And before we say goodbye to you folks, we want to again thank you for making the Locked On Giants part of your listen today. NFL fantasy draft season is here, so for your next listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so that you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, we will see you tomorrow.